Well, hi everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of my boxing hangouts, and this is going to be a very special afternoon and evening for us because we're going to be talking about a topic that is on everyone's minds. It is the 50th anniversary today of the first fight between Sonny Liston and Muhammad Ali, when Sonny Liston defended his heavyweight title against, well, actually then Cassius Clay, I should say, and Clay would ultimately, of course, defeat him and go on to be an iconic champion. And Sonny Liston didn't fare so well, not only that night, but also in the eyes of many historians. And therein lies the rub, because we're going to talk on this particular hangout a little bit more about the Sonny Liston approach to all this, because that's something that's been kind of neglected over the course of the years. It's been neglected at least up until this point. First, let me introduce our man, Dan Parks, the producer of the Hangouts. Dan, thanks for setting this all up today. It's going to be great.
I'm really excited about this one, Al. Again, this has been a couple of months in the making. We wanted to set this up especially for the 50th anniversary today, and I'm real excited to have Paul here. He put out a great article this week, which has been sent all around the internet, talking about the anniversary, and I'm thrilled that we have him here today, joining us here on the Hangout.
All right, well then let's introduce our guest, who is the author of the book Sonny Liston, The Real Story Behind the Ali Liston Fights. Paul Gallender is with us, and Paul, welcome to the Hangout. And you wrote a very entertaining book that is, I think, fascinating reading and must reading for anybody that's a boxing fan. And we thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, and I want to welcome you to what I would look at as Sonny Liston's coming out party.
Yeah, that's true. In a way, that's what it is. You know, but before we get to that, though, before we even talk about all of this, I know that on today's hangout, you have two little nuggets for us that you think is absolutely totally new material. Can you give us at least one of them as we start out this hangout?
There's one little nugget, and one big nugget. I'll give you the little one first.
Oh, there you go. Make us want for more.
Okay. It's amazing that nobody has picked up on this, but this concerns the Mike Tyson-Michael Spinks championship fight back in 1988. And it's in the record books as having lasted 1 minute and 31 seconds. And that time is wrong. And I'll tell you why. I remember watching the fight, and superimposed on the right-hand top right-hand part of the screen was a clock that was counting down from 3 minutes. And when the fight was stopped, that clock read 1:31, which is what people adopted as the time. But if that clock read 1:31, since it was counting down from 3 minutes, it means that the elapsed time of the fight was actually 1 minute and 29 seconds. This is not earth-shattering, but the record books are wrong, and they should be corrected. And
all right, we're a man with an eye toward detail. So,
exactly.
And we're going to hear a lot about detail as we go on to talk. Let's talk first. Your book, which was long time in the making for you, about Sonny Liston. What was the genesis of you deciding to write this book about, not just about Liston, but it's mostly about Liston and his approach and his viewpoint as it relates to heading into these big fights with Ali? What was the genesis of you writing it?
Well, when Cassius Clay came along, that's when I started to follow the heavyweights, and I became fascinated with the heavyweights all throughout the 60s and in the 70s. And in late 1977, I basically had two epiphanies about Sonny. The first one was when I realized that, in spite of the fact that Sonny had been dead almost 7 years, I wasn't getting any more sex than he was. And
that is an epiphany, yes.
Well, and it was a true story also. But the second, slightly more significant epiphany is it occurred to me, and I followed the heavyweights closely, like a lot of people have, is that apart from Muhammad Ali, I didn't see anybody who had ever been in the heavyweights who really stood a realistic chance of beating Sonny other than Ali. And I feel that same way today. So I decided I'm going to write a book about Sonny. Of course, I didn't know how to write at the time. And I made a lot of progress, basically about 3/4 of a page per year for 35 years. But it was a labor of love.
And what you produced, of course, was a document that has a lot of interesting material in it. Some of it very controversial, and a lot of it, I think, informational in a way that people will find very fascinating. Let's talk about Sonny Liston a little bit before we get to the Ollie Liston fights. A man who grew up in an impoverished background, in a huge family, and had to deal with some enormous disadvantages as a youngster.
Yeah, the Listons were dirt poor. Between Tobe Liston's first family and the family he had with Helen Liston, there were 25 kids.
Wow.
Yeah, and they lived in a cardboard-lined shack. Sonny said he didn't get his first pair of shoes until he was 10. He said his father sent him out to the field to work at the age of 8. And Sonny's father was an SOB. He really was. And Sonny said that. I wouldn't say it if Sonny didn't also think that way.
Yeah.
But the man was basically born to be a fighter, Sonny was.
Yeah.
And physically, he had all the physical attributes of a fighter. And his father raised him, making sure that he would have to fight for his entire life. So, yeah, I come from a very middle-class background. And I can't even imagine overcoming some of the obstacles that Sonny did. I would not, I don't think in my life I would have ever had that kind of strength. Of course, you never know what you can do until you're faced with something. But I certainly am glad that I lived in a loving family. And I'm not saying that Sonny didn't get love from his brothers and sisters and his mother in particular, but I'm not sure he ever knew true love in his entire life.
What was what was the most surprising thing you learned in doing research of this book about Sonny Liston's early life? Is there anything about it that really struck you beyond? I mean, some of the things you just suggested were pretty remarkable, but even as he became a teen and got into all his issues and his troubles?
He took responsibility. When he got arrested with 2 other guys for 3 armed robberies, it netted them maybe $14. I mean, he was a great fighter. He was not a good crook. The way he described that afterwards, he said, I did wrong, and I knew I had to pay for what I did. And so Sonny did accept responsibility. The man was no saint. He did some really bad things. But I think the thing that was most shocking is his age. Because, Sonny always said he was born in 1932. Sometimes he said he was born in 1934. And Sonny was, in all likelihood, a lot older than he said he was.
Wow.
That's astonishing. Dan, I know you have some questions you want to ask. Do you want to hit in about the early days, or?
Absolutely. Well, my interest in Sonny Liston really starts when he goes to prison. And one of the parts, I mean, the parts of your book when really Sonny Liston becomes Sonny Liston, and when he's really discovered. Can you talk a little bit about that whole process?
Yeah. Nobody wanted to mess with Sonny in prison. Nobody would mess with the man at all. And he tried to keep to himself. He didn't like prison, but he knew he had to serve his time. Apparently, he actually thought the food was the best food he had ever eaten. So that bar was fairly low. But there was a very fine prison chaplain who became the athletic director, whose name was Father Alois Stevens. And Sonny had to defend himself, and he defended the whole Negro population in Jefferson City Prison. And so Father Stevens says to him, look, if you like to fight, why not join the boxing team? And when Sonny joined the boxing team, he was such a natural that they had to import convicts from other prisons to fight him.
Right. One
of the fathers there said that in order to get him to work, they sometimes had to put 2 or 3 people in the ring at the same time against him, because he was such a natural. And the reason he was probably such a natural is he had learned to fight several years earlier. Because there is an article from the 1934 East St. Louis Journal with a picture of a man and an article whose name was Charles Sailor Liston. And he came into the ring with a pea coat on. And the photo is Sonny Liston. And this came out just before that first fight. So Sonny already knew how to fight. He didn't know how to box as well as he could have. But he was for his size, 6 feet 1/2 inch, 212 pounds, it's hard to imagine anybody being more formidable than that man.
There's lots of rumors about one specific fight where he fought multiple people. Now you said 2 or 3. Was there this legendary? I've heard people tell me 5, 6 guys in one session. What's the truth? What did you hear is the reality there?
No, the only one I heard and it's in my book, where one of the fathers, it might have been Father Schlattman, said in order to get him work, we had to put 2 or 3 guys in the ring with him at the same time, because at some point nobody wanted to get into the ring with him. He fought 8 or 10 times, and then nobody wanted to fight him. You couldn't get past his left hand, and you really, for most of Sonny's life, you really could not hurt the man. So I've never heard a story of 5 or 6 people. If Sonny was cornered by 5 or 6 people, it would still be an even fight on this.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Let's move into as he moves ahead as a professional. And Sonny Liston, for those that may just have vague memories of him, and some may, because again he became more of a footnote in history than he certainly should have. From 1955 to 1960, he just dominated the heavyweight division, won I think 28 straight fights before he lost to Ali, and beat just about everybody you could fight in the heavyweight division, and didn't just beat them, mostly destroyed them. And when he, and I just worked on a show where, I had to write a script about this, when he went into that fight with Cassius Clay, Paul, there weren't too many people that thought Sonny Liston was going to lose that fight.
Very few. There were a few trainers. Ali's own syndicate, and even Angelo Dundee, when they signed in November of 1963, none of those people thought that Cassius Clay was ready for Sonny Liston at that time. And you're right.
Can I stop you real quick,
Sure.
Paul? Because you talked about the syndicate, the Ali syndicate or the Clay syndicate, and your book. That was the first time I even knew, and I know that there was a group of backers who supported it. But can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that was the first time I had learned about that as well.
I got that in a Sports Illustrated article.
Okay.
Yeah, it had him on the cover, Ali on the cover in a vault, sitting on like $1 million, and it talked about there were 11 influential and very wealthy investors in Louisville. I think 9 or 10 of them were millionaires, and they recognized the talent in Cassius Clay, and they wanted him to succeed. And so they had a 50% interest in his contract, and they gave him a certain stipend while early in his career. But one of the things that they said is they did not want to happen what happened to Sonny Liston, and the way the jackals, as they talked about, glommed onto Sonny Liston, to happen to their fighter Cassius Clay. They took out a couple of $300,000 insurance policies on him, because they ponied up, I think, a total of $280,000. And one was just to protect their investment, and then they took out another $300,000 policy because Clay in his Cadillac would be driving down the road, and he would shadow box while he was driving an imaginary Sonny Liston. And when they heard about this, they said, "Oh no, this is not good." They couldn't stop him. You could never stop Cassius Clay or Muhammad Ali from doing anything that he wanted to do. Yeah. But they took care of him, and Angelo Dundee was a good steward for him. In fact, Angelo says that he lived such a chaste life at the time, Cassius Clay, that a lot of people thought he might be gay, because he was focused, and he had to be focused.
So we're heading into the first fight, and they signed for the first fight. The opening press conference for the first fight was something like no one had ever seen in boxing before, with Clay, obviously, or who had already become quite a showman, putting on a show. What a lot of people didn't know at the time, while there were several things about Sonny Liston's training for that fight that you talk about very well in this book. 2 elements. One, his disdain for the idea that Clay could possibly beat him, and 2, the shoulder injury that he had. Both of these were big contributing factors to how this fight would play out.
They were 2 of 4. And 2 of the 4 were a direct result of what Cassius Clay did and said in the run-up to the fight. You're right. Clay never showed any of his real ability to sports writers. And in his previous 2 fights, he had not looked really good against two blown-up light heavyweights. Doug Jones, who was a very good boxer, but he was 185 pounds, and Henry Cooper, they loved him in Great Britain, but he was not a really top-tier heavyweight. And all of the people around Sonny and all of the sports writers, they just thought the guy was a joke. So Floyd Patterson once said that he thought Sonny basically retired after he beat Patterson the first time. And to a certain extent, that's true. Because Sonny, when you were talking about his earlier career, when he destroyed the heavyweight division, in 1 year alone, he beat 4 top 10 contenders. He knocked out Cleveland Williams for the second time. He knocked out Zora Foley in 3 rounds. He knocked out Roy Harris, who won 12 rounds with Floyd Patterson in 1 round. And then Eddie Machen had an injured left shoulder, and he just wanted to make Sonny look bad, and the fight won 12 rounds. So Sonny didn't train. He trained for a 2 or 3 round fight. Clay also humiliated, demeaned, and embarrassed Sonny in some very public ways, like going to his house in Denver at midnight with his bus and waking up the whole neighborhood. And it was an integrated neighborhood. And even then, Cassius Clay was a separatist. He thought blacks should live alone and whites should live alone. And the cumulative effect of all this was that by the time Sonny got in the ring, he wanted to kill that kid. He just wanted to get it over with as quickly as possible and to give him what he thought he deserved. Let me just take a drink of water.
Go right ahead. That's allowed on our Hangouts.
Yeah. So those are the 2 things. And this was a campaign of psychological warfare, which are the words of Cassius Clay at the time and Muhammad Ali afterwards. He knew that he could be more effective, or at least as effective, in that fight based on what he did to Liston outside of the ring than in it. Because don't let anybody ever tell you, Cassius Clay and Muhammad Ali was afraid of Sonny Liston. Because that's at his best, Sonny Liston, if he fought his own fight, he really could not be beat. So the 2 other things that Sonny had going against him in that fight, one he could do nothing about was his age. And I believe that Sonny may have been twice as old as Ali when he fought that first fight. The Encyclopedia Britannica lists Sonny's date of birth, year of birth, as 1917. There's a Liston family crest that I came across once that listed his year of birth as 1919. In the tail of the tape there, yes, Sonny, it claimed Sonny was 29, which was not the case. I know for a fact that he was not 29 years old at the time. The FBI reports, and the FBI kept the file on Sonny, they listed his year of birth as 1927. When Sonny went to jail at Jefferson City Prison in 1950, they listed his year of birth at 1928. His wife was born in 1925. Sonny may have, and if that picture was in fact Sonny in the East St. Louis Journal in 1934, even if Sonny were only 15 years old, he would have been 44 years old when he got into the ring with Ali.
Wow.
But the thing that was the worst was his injured left shoulder. And it was a severely injured left shoulder. For one thing, he suffered from bursitis in both shoulders almost since the time of the aftermath of the first Patterson fight. And Lem Banker told me that while he was preparing for the Cassius Clay fight, we all know of Sonny's legendary fear of needles. But Lem Banker was in a gym, and I forget the guy's name who ran this health club, when Sonny took a shot in his left shoulder. And there's no way in the world Sonny would have taken a shot unless he absolutely needed it. Geraldine, I heard later on some audio tapes from Jack Olson, say that Sonny was in such pain in Miami Beach from his left shoulder prior to the fight that he would walk the streets at night. Sonny ended up being taken by Ash Resnick very quietly, very on the hush-hush, and this was Ash told me this, and Barney Felix, who ended up being the referee for the fight. He was a physiotherapist. And he would give Sonny ultrasound and heat pack treatments on his left shoulder. So Sonny tried to get the fight postponed, but the athletic commission in Miami Beach was mad at him because they thought he feigned a knee injury in the spring of 1963, which cost Miami Beach the Patterson rematch. And in fact, doctors said Sonny needed surgery to his left knee. But he ended up resting his knee, and he didn't need surgery. So when Sonny went there asking for a postponement, they said, "Oh no, you're not getting a postponement." So he went into the ring
with a bad knee and a bad shoulder.
Even if his knee was okay, but you got under the one thing that everybody needs to know about Sonny Liston. If somebody tells you that, Sonny Liston had one of the best jabs of all time, no. Sonny had the jab of all time. Every other jab was secondary, because he could knock you out or knock you down with his left jab. He destroyed big bags. And his left hook, his left hand, he could control his fights with. If he had an injury to his right shoulder, he might have somehow been able to pull that fight out, even though he still only trained for a 2 or 3 round fight. He weighed 218 when his best fighting weight was between 209 and 212. And so when he went into the ring, after he had eaten, he was probably 225 pounds. You look at that guy, and that was not the guy we had ever seen in the ring before. So those are the 4 things, Al.
Yeah, so that sets the stage for this fight. And then obviously, as the fight moved past the early stages when Liston kind of thought he might score a knockout. And by the way, part of the reason why he thought he might score that knockout early is Clay had been down against Cooper. He'd been down against Billy Daniels. Cooper, in fact, had him in trouble. It was right at the end of the round. So Clay had been down several times already in his pro career against men that weren't huge punchers. Liston, of course, had, in addition to whatever the physical issues were, had a hard time dealing with Ali's speed, or Clay's speed, which, of course, would happen much later. When he stopped, when that fight was stopped, and the shoulder was too much for him to continue. You talk about it in the book. Very disconsolate moment for him.
Tex Mall wrote that he saw.
Great writer.
Well, I have a less than stellar opinion of the man.
Well, I mean, he was a good writer in Sports Illustrated, but I know there are many questions about him. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, he touted Sonny for a while, and then he completely changed his tune. And but in the day, there were a lot of guys who felt the same way about Sonny that he did. But he said there were tears coming down Sonny's cheeks. When Angelo Dundee, after the fight was stopped, after Jack Nyland and Willie Reddish waved Barney Felix off and said he can't continue, he broke his shoulder, Dundee walks over to Sonny's corner to just kind of give his regards and say, nice fight, Sonny, or whatever. And he wrote that he said, Sonny was wailing, my glove feels like it's full of water. So people have really said, was there a shoulder injury? I don't think. The evidence is sketchy. Supposedly Milt Bailey, one of the cornermen, said, they came up with that after the fight. Well, 8 doctors examined the man. When he went to the hospital, he couldn't even put his jacket on. The circumference of his left arm had increased by 4 inches. Sonny was definitely injured. And you can see it. He didn't keep his left hand up. You need your left hand as much for offense, and you need it for defense when you're a conventional fighter. And he could not protect himself. He didn't throw a leverage punch in really a left hand in the whole fight. I remember in the 4th round seeing Sonny hit 2 jabs onto Clay's face, and Clay's face did not move. Sonny's jab actually was somewhat of a detriment, some fighters thought, because when he hit you with it, guys would go backwards, and he couldn't come, so most fighters, they jab and they come with their right. Well, he knocked fighters out of range, but Sonny didn't care, because it was a war of attrition. Like Joe Louis said, whenever and wherever Sonny Liston hit you, he hurt you, and everybody knew that. As far as Ali, he took a great punch, meaning that he could get up. But the reason people knocked him down is he pulled back rather than ducked or put up his hands to defend himself. And when you do that, a guy who's throwing a left hook at the right time, and that's what knocked him down with Henry Cooper and with Sonny Banks. Right. Sonny had an 84-inch reach. He didn't have to run after Ali. Ali had to come to him. Ali had a 79-inch reach. So.
Yeah, but Clay made him come to him.
Well,
and part of it was, whether it was the psychological part or Liston, I mean, Liston was champ. He could have made him come to him, but he didn't.
Well, no, he fought angry. And
Right.
if a Sonny Liston fighting angry on the street, you don't want to be in the same zip code. You really don't. But in the ring, there's a reason they call the sport boxing. And the only people who could really give Sonny trouble, as with any other great puncher, is a boxer. You weren't going to outpunch Sonny. Some guy, you know, I'm not saying that George Foreman, if you hit him just right, you know, if they're both in their prime at the same time, or Ernie Shavers, or any big hitter might have hurt him. But if you watch the two Cleveland Williams fights, this man had an ability to absorb punishment that was almost not human.
Yeah, great chin. So he loses the first fight, Sonny Liston, and you talk in the book about how there was an immediate revision of history as it relates to him, kind of starting the trend of downgrading what Liston was, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, it was an embarrassing outcome. People thought, you don't sit on your stool. Well, what's more debilitating in a fight, I would ask, if you're cut around the eye or if you really can't use your left hand? Now, they'll stop fights for cuts, and they should. Look, I'm not saying it's a humane sport. I mean, I consider it a sport, and I love watching fight films. But so if they stop a fight for a cut eye, if you can't defend yourself, where does it say that he needs to go out there and get knocked down or beat up even further? You know, the cut below his eye, because it was below his eye, they're not going to stop a fight for that.
Right.
You know, if it starts getting in your eye, and I understand that, but I would maintain that the injury he suffered to his left shoulder was far more severe than any kind of cut.
Mm-hmm.
And like Jack Nyland explained after the fight, he says it's like you have a horse, and he's in the Kentucky Derby, and he starts to favor a leg, and he said you pull him up because you want him to run in the other two Triple Crown races. You don't want to cause any damage, any long-term damage, and that's what they did. Sonny did not quit. He was told this fight was over. I don't care what nugget they get out there that say, oh yeah, Sonny quit. Sonny did not quit. Sonny was not a quitter, and he didn't. The second fight was another story.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah.
But I'm basically 100% certain the first fight was not fixed.
Mm-hmm.
It's all you got to do is watch the fight. Does he look like he's trying to throw the fight? No, he looks like an idiot. He looks like an amateur. You have never seen Sonny Liston fight that way. Just as you never saw George Foreman fight the way he did against Ali. He looked like an amateur.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he totally got
and clearly, the common denominator there, to some degree, is Ali, who made it happen. Although the injury issue was also a part of it. So the backlash comes, and now we're headed toward the rematch of the two. But it's a bumpy road getting to the rematch for those that don't remember. And of course, you chronicle all of it in your book. One of the key things is that the fight gets postponed because of Ali getting a hernia. A big issue for Liston because at this advanced age, having not trained well for the first fight, he did train as hard as he could for the second fight, and it was canceled not too far in front of the fight after he had almost a full training camp.
I'm glad you brought that up because most people have long since forgotten this. That fight was scheduled for Boston, November 16th, 1964. Sonny was a very superstitious man, very superstitious. November 13th, Friday, November 13th, 1964, Ali suffers a hernia. Mm-hmm. Sonny, I mean, he had worked his tail off. He was in the best shape of his entire life. One of his physical therapists says this guy could go 30 rounds. He was ready. I don't care how old he was. He had one more great fight, and he would have needed a great fight because Ali was getting better. He was getting bigger. You know, Ali probably wasn't at his prime yet because he was only 22 years old, but he was getting closer to his prime. By 23, he was in his prime. And to me, that was like the saddest moment in Sonny's life because he was an old man, and he had an old body, and he had old muscles. And like Ali said, experts tell me that no man as old as Sonny can get back into training, can get back into great shape twice within 6 months. And basically, that hernia, I wrote an article on this once. Ali survived his hernia, but it killed Liston because you could trace the clock ticking on Sonny's life. He had about 2,234 days left to live, and that's the moment that started him down that road. And even people in Ali's camp, they were worried about that fight. And there have been rumors, and rumors are just, they're a dime a dozen, where there are people who actually think that that Ali didn't suffer a hernia, which is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. I believe he suffered a hernia. What are you're going to get doctors to perjure themselves that he didn't suffer a hernia? But he did, and that was Sonny's last hurrah against a guy like Muhammad Ali.
So they rescheduled the fight, and it can't be in Boston. So some 20 days before, they end up having to move the fight to Lewiston, Maine. Yet another part of the bizarre lead up to this fight. And you couldn't even make this story up, really. Somebody, if you're a screenwriter and you made it up, somebody would question you.
Yeah, it's in a high school hockey arena. They had fights there before, but nobody wanted to fight. Yeah, Boston pulled out. They brought
tried to
suit
get it in
against the fight.
Cleveland, correct? And that didn't work.
No, the mayor wouldn't even see them. Nobody at that time.
That's right. The mayor of Cleveland won't see me either. So I get it.
Well, I think it's probably a different mayor. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Maybe, yeah.
So Maine willingly took the fight, but they have it in this hockey arena, which is wholly unsuitable. There's no air conditioning. It's extremely hot. Ali, when he went to see the place, he called it an embarrassment, and it really was. I don't want to disparage Lewiston, Maine in any way, and it's a part of boxing history now, and a very unfortunate part of boxing history. But this was a heavyweight championship fight. But by the time that fight took place, people despised Ali because of his conversion to Islam, and they still weren't really fond of Sonny. Although in some circles, Sonny was. People would rather have put up with a guy who had been in jail and who had mob associations, not of his own making, I might add, than somebody who, is an obnoxious kid, although he had toned it down quite a bit, and he was a white separatist. And I go, how did we fall? Well, where's Floyd Patterson? Come on, Rocky Marciano, where is it? Joe Louis, come on, back. We'll give you the title. Just come. And so it actually was a fairly appropriate place. And then all hell broke loose.
So I'm going to walk you through this because your assertions about why this fight ending up the way it did, and what you think will surely, for people that haven't read the book, will surely come as a surprise, and some will scoff, and some will be difficult to convince of your idea. Walk us through what happened the days leading up to the Liston Ali fight that lead you to where you're at on why you believe Sonny Liston threw this fight.
Okay. When I started writing this book, I never thought that I would find out the reason why Sonny took the dive. But I knew from day one he took a dive, as did just about everybody else. The backdrop for the fight for 3 or 4 weeks prior was that the Muslim faction that was loyal to Malcolm X, who had been driven from the Nation of Islam in the good graces of Elijah Muhammad, and had been assassinated, people thought, by that faction, that the supporters of Malcolm X were going to exact retribution by assassinating Muhammad Ali at some point. And a lot of people have said, oh, that wasn't, David Remnick in his book, he reduced it to all the rumors to being the sly rumor mongering of Harold Conrad, who was the fight's publicist. I go into great detail to show just how palpable the fear was. And Ali was afraid of those rumors.
Well, also, not to interrupt, but you talked about the FBI putting a stamp of approval on. Also, the amount of security they had around Ali was massive.
Oh yeah, he couldn't.
And Liston too, for that matter.
Well, yeah, and Liston had his own training, his own security, but Sonny said to Robert Lipsyte, and this shows you how concerned he was. He says, you know, what's there for me to worry about? They're after him. And like the next day, he says, they're coming to get him, not me, right? So Sonny was afraid of crazy people. And Norman Mailer said that Sonny was afraid of Muslims because he just couldn't understand them. And he stayed away from them in prison, and he wanted nothing to do with them because actually Sonny wanted to integrate. He wanted to be part of the American story. And, you know, he wanted to be treated like everybody else. He wanted a second chance. So he had people tasting his food. He was worried. But Ali, whenever he would do his road work, like if he would do it on a field, FBI agents and other law enforcement would make sure there was nobody hiding in the bushes. Excuse me. Ali himself said he could see rifles pointed out, rifles from law enforcement, just in case. And Ali was very worried about it. So that was the backdrop. And as the fight got closer, Sonny, he thought he was going to win the fight. He told people to load up on betting because he said, I'm going to kill this bum this time. You know, nothing's going to get me out of there unless they kill me. Well, unfortunately, the day of the fight, and let me backtrack a little. Ash and Marilyn Resnick, and Ash Resnick has been maligned a great deal and very unfairly. And he was close to Sonny, he was close to Ali, and the Resnicks were very good friends with Joe and Martha Lewis and Geraldine and Sonny Liston. And on the morning of the fight, Marilyn Resnick can't find Geraldine. They spend a lot of time together, and she was really worried because she wasn't answering her phone. And they had arrived 2 days before the Resnicks from New York to get to Maine. And she sees Martha Malone Lewis, who is an attorney, and she says to Martha, I'm worried, I can't find Geraldine. This isn't like her. She's never been unavailable. And Martha says, don't you know what's happened, Marilyn? The black Muslims have her and the boy. And they told Sonny, if he wants to see them again alive, he has to lose the fight. That one of Sonny's sons that he had fathered out of wedlock was with them. It was a boy by the name of Bobby, I believe. They let Geraldine go later in the day. And Marilyn Resnick told me she looked as white as a sheet. Ali had nothing to do with this, I'm convinced. Absolutely nothing. He would never agree to anything like this. Because at that point, if he thought he could beat Sonny Liston, I would have agreed with him. Because just of Sonny's age and the fact that that first fight got postponed. But what I think may have happened is that the mob may have put this suggestion into the minds of some of the Nation of Islam members who were loyal to Ali. Because I've read where they pulled this kind of stunt, I believe, on another black fighter. I'm not sure if it was Virgil Akins or there was one black fighter in a book I was reading who intimated that had happened to him. Which, of course, I don't know of anybody, and I doubt that you know of anybody. I doubt anybody watching this podcast would not do the same thing that Sonny Liston did when faced with the circumstances he was faced with. And I talked to somebody who befriended Emil Griffith later on in life. And Emil was evidently good friends with Sonny afterwards, which I like. I like that for the fact that Emil was gay or bisexual. And if you're bisexual, you're gay. And Sonny Liston, this manly man, he didn't care. He respected Emil Griffith as being a great fighter. Emil Griffith said that Sonny Liston told to him, when Sonny knew he had to take the dive, he said to himself, I'm going to make this the worst looking dive in history, which is exactly what he did.
He certainly did that.
Now, so let's stop here for a moment because, there's going to be people watching this that are going to say, well, wait a second, let's backtrack here. So your source for this essentially is Joe Lewis's wife and Ash Resnick's wife.
Well, Ash Resnick's wife is my source.
Is your source telling you that Joe Lewis's wife had told her that? Do we have any other indication that this happened beyond that?
Apart from Sonny telling Emil Griffith?
Yeah, and that that you got it direct from Emil or from?
No, I got it from a man by the name of David DiCarlo, who's done a lot of research, and he would always go to the International Boxing Hall of Fame gatherings every year, and Emil and a lot of fighters have always gone there. I've never been there myself in upstate New York.
Did you find anyone else that could corroborate this?
Well, no, and Sonny didn't want anybody to know, and I'll tell you just how much he didn't want anybody to know. Sonny was very close to his sister Alcora, and I had the pleasure of talking to 3 of Alcora's children, Helen Long, Fannie Mae Hopkins, and Henry Page, right before Henry Page died. And Helen Long was the oldest of Alcora's children and was named after Sonny's mother. And when Sonny got back to St. Louis to visit Alcora after that fight, so he's talking to Alcora, and Helen tells me she's out of the way, but close enough to hear exactly what they're saying. And Alcora says, Sonny, what happened to you? He didn't even hit you. And he says to his sister, he says, I can't talk about it. He was fearing for any member of his family. Alcora had 14 children. It wouldn't, for one thing, I don't think anybody would have believed Sonny, because basically what we're talking about here is the narrative that has been Sonny Liston since particularly 1965. And unlike any other athlete who, after they've been out of the picture for a while, and especially after they die, the public perception of them improves. And Sonny is not the case. In fact, people treat him worse now than they did when he was alive. So, but again, what is it? 4th removed, my source. Marilyn didn't even know what she was telling me when she told me that. I mean, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I go, no, here's the story. But she was told by Martha Lewis. The only one Martha would have heard it from was Joe Lewis. And Sonny was very tight with Joe, and probably the only person that he would have felt comfortable venting to. So, can I say with 100% proof? No, but I'm 99% sure that that's what happened. And this, by the way, was not the scoop I was talking about, because
I understand.
This has been out
get to that in a moment.
Yeah, Paul, the one thing, and by the way, I loved your book, and especially a lot of the early chapters when you were talking about how Sonny's initially got involved with the mob, and some of the connections, and how fights were arranged. The research and the detail that you did on that was really outstanding, and I thought a lot of that work and a lot of that really led up to when we get to this part. And to me, as obviously, as you see looking behind me, I'm a huge Ali fan, and I'm in love with this particular fight.
As am I.
Yeah, absolutely. As the world is, right? Yeah, sure. It's really interesting, because when people look at this picture, I was wearing this all day long today, and and when people look at that photo, they see that photo, and people have very strong sentiment about it, and I look at it and I always go, wow, so many questions. Even from what Ali was saying when talking to Liston while he was there on the mat. But one of the things, the thing that popped in my head as soon as I read that one part was, in all of these years, and let me just ask this question, all these years since this has happened, I look back to things like Deep Throat with the Nixon thing, right? When years go by, eventually somebody comes out of the woodwork. And somebody will, say, "Oh, well, guess what? That's who it actually was."
The guy said, "Yeah, it was me." So, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious if if beyond what you've talked about, if anybody else, I would think by now that either somebody who was involved with the kidnapping, or one of their offspring or something like that would have heard something, because it's a big historical event that I think somebody would have talked about even within their tightest circles. Has there ever been anything else that you've heard of or that's come out like that?
No, and I don't know why anybody would want to, because it takes away from a little bit of Ali's persona and legend. A couple of things. It was one thing I forgot to mention about the fight, which is why I know the fight was fixed. and then I'll get back to that. That iconic photo, which is unfortunately most people's reference point about Sonny Liston today. People who know nothing about boxing or who know very little about boxing or anybody born after 1970, that's all they know about Sonny Liston. Now, you look at Ali, and he's uncharacteristically ferocious looking. He's screaming at Ali, and this is, you can read this in articles of the fight. And what is he at Liston? What is Ali screaming at Liston? Get up, you yellow bum. Nobody will believe this. Well, yeah, I didn't believe it. I mean, this is public enemy number one, this photo. It's a great photo. It may be the photo of the century, but what it depicted may as well have been a staged event. Mm-hmm. And when Ali went back to his corner, and this is in his, I believe it's in his autobiography, the first thing he says to his cornermen is, he laid down. So he knew it. He was angry. He thought Sonny was making a fool of him. He thought Sonny was absolutely making a fool of him. And, you know, and poor Sonny, what the heck could he do? But one other thing too, and I don't want people to misinterpret. I mean, Muhammad Ali, I always admired him. I was a child of the 60s. But I think a lot of people believe that if you say anything good about Sonny Liston, you are somehow saying something bad about Muhammad Ali. Yeah. And that's not the case. I mean, it's absolutely not the case. They both were great fighters. I can't say Sonny Liston was a greater fighter than Muhammad Ali because of the two fights, but I can make an excellent case that Sonny Liston was the more talented of the two fighters, and he had a lot more to work with. And Archie Moore makes that statement, makes that case even better than I do.
Well, he was definitely one of the most tormented fighters, and you know that was another thing about your book that I pulled out of this that I had no idea. How all the different arrests in St. Louis, and was it St. Louis in particular?
Well, St. Louis, yeah, they threatened to kill him if he didn't leave town, the police department. And in Philadelphia, he'd do his road work, and if his foot touched the grassy part of a private residence or private building, they stopped him, made him assume the position, spread his legs, and they frisked him because he had touched the grass with his foot. Yeah, and in Denver is where it even got worse. And he loved Denver. He loved Denver. His sparring partner says the same two police stopped him probably 100 times, including 25 days in a row. Mm-hmm. Just to stop him.
So, and you make the, you know, after all this went down, and I think everyone, whether they subscribe to your theory or however they feel, I think many people believe that, you know, Liston probably threw that fight. He goes on to continue fighting after that, never getting quite back to where he was. And, of course, he was, as you pointed out, his age was very much in question. God knows how old he was when he was fighting then. And then met an untimely death, and his death, again, a controversial situation in Las Vegas, here in Las Vegas, where, you know, the idea was it was supposed to be suicide, but many believe it wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't suicide. Yeah. Sonny would never kill himself. Was Sonny doing drugs? It seems that maybe he was. Was he shooting drugs? I doubt it, but I don't know. I mean, he had fallen pretty far, and he was pretty much out of control. He was dealing drugs. Was he killed or not killed? Most people, that's what they want to know. That's the main thing they want to know about Sonny Liston, how he died, because that was terrible. He was dead 7 or 8 days. Geraldine was out of town in St. Louis, and so it looked really, really fishy. And the police knew he was dead for as early as New Year's Day, and they just let him rot there. And other people knew. And
that was also wait. That was another big deal that from your book that didn't. You know, it was like, wait. Did I read that correctly? So the police knew he was dead, saw him in where he was, and there was no report, nothing was done, and they left him in that location. Is that right?
That's right.
Wow.
Johnny Tocco told a friend of mine, Tony Davi, in Las Vegas, that he leveled with him. And there were parts of his story which were different. He said there were signs of a struggle. So if he was killed, maybe they cleaned up. His housekeeper Mildred Stevenson, she was the same housekeeper for Johnny Carson, and Lem Banker is a friend of mine and just an icon in Las Vegas. And when Mildred went, I believe it was on New Year's Eve, to Sonny's house to clean up because she had her own key, she discovered that he was dead, and the house was in good order. And she called Lem and said, "Sonny's dead," and she locked the door and she left. And so Geraldine got home on the 5th, and she found Sonny in a very terrible.
What did Lem do when he found out he was dead? You mean he notified the authorities and they didn't come?
I don't think he notified the authorities. I think he just said, "Oh, my friend is gone." And
so you mentioned at the beginning that you had a nugget about Sonny that would be intriguing and newsworthy, and I think maybe we want to hear that now.
Yeah. In 2 words, Sonny is back. Sonny's back. And I need to soften the blow here. And Al, this is coming from, you grew up in the Chicago area, as did I.
I did, yes.
We are probably very similar in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you have as much respect for the truth and goodness and everything that I do. So this is coming from one nice Jewish boy from the Chicago area to another nice Jewish boy from the Chicago area. And let me preface this by saying what I used to believe about life until a couple of years ago. I thought that my whole adult life, that when you were born, basically a light switch goes on, and when you died, that light switch goes off.
Mm-hmm.
People in my family would tell you this, that I thought that everything that happened to anybody was random and arbitrary. I knew how important good luck was, and if you had good luck, you could accomplish just about anything in life and have a great life. If you were plagued or cursed with bad luck, you might not survive the first such instance of bad luck. I've never been religious. I was bar mitzvahed, but who wasn't when you were growing up in a Jewish neighborhood? I never believed in God. I never believed in reincarnation, and I never believed in an afterlife. I figured I'm here. I don't know why I'm here. It's not that important to me. I'm not the slightest bit curious about it, and I know right from wrong. I try and live my life as righteously as I possibly can and to do good things. And I've worked for nonprofit groups. I've raised money for nonprofit groups my entire life. And that's what I did with my life. It wasn't a very lucrative thing, but I felt good every day that I was doing something.
Having been involved in many nonprofits and one very close to my heart, I respect and admire what you've done.
So that being said, beginning on the evening of March 10th, 2012, the man that we knew as Charles Sonny Liston began providing a medium by the name of Josie Rose, R-O-A-S-E, with verifiable proof that there is in fact an afterlife. Right. And as it turns out, based on the 35 years of research, I didn't come on the show to embarrass you or Al or myself. I have verifiable proof that there is an afterlife in the form of things that Sonny communicated beginning on March 10th to Josie Rose, names that she could not possibly have known about. Mm-hmm. I have 70.
She's a medium? And where is she a medium?
She's a medium in Denver. And there are a lot of mediums, and a lot of people, anybody who's seen a medium, they'll tell you, oh, she told me things about or he told me things about my mother that only I would possibly know, which they say, I can verify the authenticity of what this person is saying. The difference here is that Sonny Liston was a well-known figure, and there was a lot of stuff in print.
What were some of the details that convinced you she had actually had a connection with him?
Oh, it was in the first day he gave her several. He started out, and I was totally unprepared for this. But I quickly realized that, well, I guess I did. The way I've been thinking about things is wrong. Josie feels a huge right hand on her right hand, and Sonny introduces himself to her by name. About 3 minutes into this, after I had gasped and got some pen and paper to start notating things here, Josie says to me, do the names William and Dolores mean anything to you? William Wingate is one of the children that Sonny fathered out of wedlock. He's the only one of Sonny's kids that I have met. He lives in Philadelphia. He was born 5 days before Sonny won the title. A great guy. We hit it off immediately. And Bill's mother's name is Dolores. Sonny was talking about how he regretted associating with certain people in his life, and that he was not smart enough to outsmart the mob. And let me go back one step. When I first connected with Josie Rose, she had not heard of Sonny Liston. She despised boxing for what it epitomized. And this was just after I had submitted my book to my publisher, Patricia Hamilton in California, to get ready for publication. And when you start talking to a woman, it's probably not a good idea to talk boxing, but she knew that I had to tell her what my passion was. And he said he was not smart enough to outsmart the mob. And that when you lay down with pigs, you end up smelling like them. And he said, I don't mean to insult pigs, because he said he thought they were very smart. But he said there was a guy by the name of Frank. In fact, there were two guys by the name of Frank that he's referring to. And as you probably know, the two guys who ran boxing at a championship level, the mobsters in the 40s and the 50s, were Frankie Carbo, right, who was the commissioner, the unofficial commissioner of boxing, and Frank Blinky Palermo, who lived in Philadelphia and had the biggest stable of fighters. There are two things that he said. Again, I have 70 of these, and I know
this is an article. This is an article right here.
No, well, I think this is. I think it's a game changer, and I don't want to tout this. I'm not. I need to tell you that all I did was write a book. All I did was write a book. Josie Rose found me. She was directed to me. Turns out, I was in Chicago at the time. She was in Denver. Turns out we actually went to the same high school at the same time. I didn't know her. She was 2 years younger than I am. One day she says to me, and this was like a week later, and I have 70 references, which are not stretches by any means whatsoever. That's why I call them verifiable proof. Mm-hmm. She says, do you know Louis Stevenson? And that priest in Jefferson City Prison, Father Alois Stevens. Only somebody who did the amount of research that I did would know this particular fact. I've only seen it in two places. I saw it in a magazine article, and when I read the transcripts of the Senate hearings to determine in 1960 in December to determine the influence that organized crime had over boxing, because they saw Sonny Liston coming along and they were worried. They knew that he was connected to the mob. Sonny called Father Stevens. For some reason, he always called him Father Stevenson. And and Kefauver goes, you mean Father Stevens? He says, yeah, Father Stevenson. What Sonny was apparently doing, he was giving me authenticity. He needed to convince me right away, even though I knew who Josie Rose was, and I knew that she was real, that what she did was real. I never paid any attention to any of this before. And so he gave me a number of things that were spot on. She says to me twice, like a week apart. She says, he really loves Jackie. I said, I mentioned Jackie Kennedy in my book, but I don't think he really loved Jackie Kennedy. And 2 days later, I'm looking back some of my old research, and I see a 1964 magazine article in Sports Illustrated by Mark Cram, where he's talking to Stanley Zimmering and his physiotherapist. And he says, well, what do you guys do when he's not training? He says, well, we go for walks. You go for walks? Yeah. And what do you do on a walk? So, Sonny talks. We go for 2-hour walks. Sonny's talking the whole time. And Sonny, was a man of few words. Mm-hmm. And he says, Cram says to Zimmering, well, what does he talk about? He says, well, he talks about his dog Jackie, which is a German Shepherd. I didn't even know that. I had read that article 4 or 5 times because I love Mark Cram. but here's to me the thing that was most meaningful to me. Sometime in March, Sonny said, "Tell Paul about the number 7." On May 3rd, on the evening of May 3rd, Sonny tells Josie, "Tell Paul lucky 7. Tell him about number 7, and tell him it's okay. He should tell John about this." On May 4th, I'm getting ready to leave Chicago. I'd been there 9 months, which was plenty for me. And John Sorkin is my cousin Linda's oldest son, and I don't have a better male friend than this guy. He's like 16 years younger than I am, but we've always been close because I spent a lot of time when I was around him as a kid. He's walking me to my car in the driveway. This is a day after that communication from Sonny. And the sky is threatening as hell. I remember seeing a sky this threatening 3 or 4 times in Chicago before. It turned the color of the sky like an iridescent green. I'm getting ready to get in my car, and John looks up above and says, "Paul, look at that cloud. There's a perfectly formed number 7 in it." And I said, I mean, there was a number 7 in that cloud. Josie and Sonny are collaborating on 2 books. And I know these, if you could see the look on your face.
I can't wait.
If in April there's going to be a book out called Healing in the Afterlife. Because Sonny, he talked a lot about things in his life, in his most recent life, that he never talked about before. Mm-hmm. But more of it is he's trying to educate people about what the afterlife's all about and how to prepare for it.
Well,
I was going to say, hopefully we're going to get a lot more details about the first and second fight also.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah.
We should get corroboration then from him about this kidnapping as well. Well, it's interesting. No, that's intriguing. I didn't think you were taking us in that direction. That was intriguing, to say the least. Hey, Paul, we really appreciate you taking all the time with us here. And again, the book is very entertaining. It's called Sonny Liston: The Real Story Behind the Ollie Liston Fights. And there are a lot of things today people will have to chew on, not the least of which is the last assertion you made, but a number of them. But it's interesting, and more than anything, I'm happy you wrote this book because there's a lot of other material in here about Sonny Liston that people needed to know.
Yes.
Yeah, and the way I believe is that I've read everything about Sonny Liston because I have to. And all the other books that have been written about Sonny, all the biographies, or all the other books about other fighters that reference Sonny in a substantial way, to me, are almost totally dismissive of the man's talent and pretty much contemptuous of him as a human being. And it's always irritated me.
And there were many sides of Sonny Liston. I knew a lot of people in the 80s who knew him very well, and it wasn't as with most people, it's not a simplistic picture. When you paint a picture of him, there's more nuances. Even though, as you said, he certainly wasn't a saint, and nobody is. Hey, Paul, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Al. I've enjoyed this immensely. I hope you've enjoyed it almost as much as I have.
Well, thank you very much. Paul Gallender, the author of Sonny Liston: The Real Story Behind the Ollie Liston Fights. And Dan, as we press forward in our with our Hangouts, we'll be coming back again in early in March, leading up to the Canelo Alvarez Alfredo Angulo fights. Correct?
Yes, sir. I believe that we're going to be coming in on March 4th. And we're still playing around with our time, and I think we've got a special guest who's going to be joining us also. Your friend Claudia is, I think, going to be joining us on that day.
Excellent. We're gonna have some fun folks joining us and have a chance to talk about that fight and some other things in the sport of boxing. Well, Dan, thank you for setting this up, and we thank all of you for watching. And I know there's going to be some interesting comments made about this, and it's been quite a fascinating hangout. We'll see you again on March 4th.